Good afternoon. It's 5:11 p.m. on March 28, 2021. First of all, let me say that I have absolutely no understanding that there is any legal justification for saying that remedies concerning criminal charges and organized crime are to be exclusively confined to the means of binding arbitration or some form of mediation and or exclusively within the realm of some sort of civil proceeding that would seek to address factors associated with monetary damages without being considered primarily an effort to attempt to extort individuals or solicit a bribe. That is in addition to the role they could potentially play in a kickback scheme, which itself could be connected to the contract to commit to a criminal conspiracy under consideration when it comes to a pattern of racketeering. With that understood, I'm going to acknowledge that, as I said earlier, there's a 14-day appeal period pending on what otherwise was an incomprehensible act by one alleging to be a member of the judicial branch, federal district court, by the way, but located within the Northern District of Texas. Today, I did something I don't usually do. I went and pulled something out of the trash can. You know, when I was homeless on the streets and I didn't want to go to places that required me to convert my Jew to a Christian by dying and depositing the minerals, I ate out of trash cans for about 6 to 8 months while I was on the street. But this was different. There was a newspaper. There was the Dallas Morning News, dated for today, in the trash can, and I pulled it out. I don't have much of an opportunity to peruse the newspaper. I usually get my news online, and I'm glad I pulled this one out. Today, there are two notable articles on the same topic, one in the opinion section and one in the metro section. The first one in the opinion section is on page 5P. It's entitled ERCOT Must Explain Price Spikes, written by a Rob Schneider, who is identified as the co-founder of Stream Energy Electric Retailer and is a general partner of Connect Limited. The other one is written by an individual named Dave Lieber. If I am correct, I've actually read writings by Mr. Lieber before. I have in another one of my newspapers, which are actually evidentiary. Yes, I do. I have a article or a column by Mr. Lieber specifically concerning changes that or legislation that went into effect by the legislature around the time that they approved their education package during the last session. So I am familiar with his work. He provides, among other things, a timeline, ERCOT's history of incompetence. Regardless of the manner in which it's presented, I take it that what he says in terms of actual events is factually correct, and it has been proofread and copy edited by the editor. And so there was an understanding of what could potentially be put on the public record as being understood as presentation of fact. Now, in the opinion section, well, I used to be a newspaper editor, right? And I know that when I edited, every once in a while something would get into print that later when I got the print edition, I would be like, darn, I really wish I had caught that before it got put to print, right? And perhaps that's the case with what happened in regards to that alleged legal filing, or rather that order that was issued on Monday. See, I had filed a request for articles of impeachment to be brought against the Texas State Senate in January of 2019 for a variety of charges specific to changes to legislation that had happened that were completely unconstitutional, as well as obstruction by the state of Texas through the legislature in a remedy toward the abuses of the Attorney General as well as the Governor of Texas. A failure for the Texas legislature, specifically through the Texas Senate, to address the abuse of office of the governor and to allow certain pieces of legislation to get to the governor's office without seeking constitutional remedy for those abuses, as well as other actions that had taken place by the governor of Texas, I understood were actually an indictment against the authority of the Texas Senate and needed to have some intervention, that it was worthy and justified articles of impeachment to be drawn. However, currently, under the constitutional process of Texas, outside of a remedy through the Supreme Court of Texas, which by that time itself had engaged in numerous breaches of the Constitution, there was not an appropriate remedy without seeking some sort of federal intervention or federal assistance, and there was a constitutional claim for the intervention of the federal courts in forestalling breaches of the Texas Constitution concerning the power of the federal district courts to provide remedies for abuses of state constitutional matters committed by members of the state judiciary. I mentioned this because one of the problems I've been having with these false judicial processes, or these abuses of the judicial processes, including my allegations of engaging my efforts in derivative actions without actually addressing the charges or the facts presented in my efforts at filing cases, is specifically related to the fact that one of the motions discussed a system of automation, invoked a special order that said I had been determined to be eligible for case management through an automated system. So when I went through and I did what you could call a analysis of the automation based upon my evidence that I had been acquiring regarding how my case had been used in derivative actions, there was a particular way that it ended up lining up in a particular kind of automation. Now, we are on the 13th day. And one of the things that occurred in the process of that automated system was that there was a position for 63, which is the license number for international securities brokers, that had a specific reference to a missing R, a lowercase r. Now, because of the level of the concern that I have, and what was a part of the original bill of exception to my writ of habeas corpus, which provides the foundation for what I understand to be the highest level of risk it needs to be associated with, and not only that, also necessarily precludes it from being able to be used in derivative actions that attempt a simulation of any military process, including any military process that may be using it in connection with any sort of contract bidding, which I understand that Supreme Court of Texas does frequently when it comes to legal filings that are presented before the Supreme Court of Texas, and also may implicate local districts or lower districts within the state of Texas in the same kinds of crimes. But insofar as that is one of the highest levels of consideration, I always try to reference or cross-check for a potential conflict of interest, if not an outright peril, in the fact that the substantive charges of my cases have never been addressed directly, and rather I am repeatedly subjected to intentionally abusive processes that are, I understand, intentionally engaged in violation of appropriate rules of procedure in order to attempt to compel a particular action upon appeal. And insofar as that's the case, there was the 63rd position that had identified a lowercase r. And my concern was for the capital R. Now, because we are in the state of Texas and I requested assistance with redress concerning matters in the state of Texas, that is one area. So when it ends up implicating derivative actions or actions that are associated with things that are going on internationally concurrently, and we're dealing with the little r versus the big R, this is even more of a concern. But these two articles here, specifically understanding that today's the Sunday before the 14-day appeal period would be ended, and also understanding, as I do, that tomorrow there are two major changes to international policy, international trade policy, that are set to occur, then what I just found in the Dallas Daily News is very important for consideration. First of all, I need to say that in the opinion section there are two very concerning typos that I do not understand are explicitly intentional, but I also do not understand to be an accident. One of them is something comparable to something I saw when I was reviewing the Federal Register concerning the awards of a license for the Clinton power plant It's for a nuclear power plant. The specific effort I made to contact the Federal Register about correcting a typographical error that had appeared in the Federal Register, only to allow for the deadline to pass without any direct addressing and then to be diverted to somebody else rather than addressing the typo, I believe had very significant consequences. And something very comparable is in here. Right now, there is an area where they were talking, where the writer, Mr. Snyder, is talking about the manners in which people were contracted with their various retailers. But there is a specific missing of the letter R. So instead of it saying contracted, it says contacted. And in the events that we are currently dealing with COVID 19, as well as with unconstitutional changes that have occurred in the state of Texas, specifically regarding bidding on contracts and contract awards, I'm very concerned about this missing R, lowercase r, that changes the context from contracted to contacted. Additionally, in the actual text of the editorial itself, there is a paragraph that has 3 sentences. And the third sentence is repeated in a separate standalone formation as a paragraph with 2 words edited to alter it. Quote, and closing ranks, these power providers accused the aggrieved end retailers of trying to purport market failure as a cover story to socialize these towering costs across all ERCOT actors. That ends the paragraph. Next paragraph. Closing ranks, these power providers accused the aggrieved end retailers of trying to claim market failure as cover to socialize the costs across all ERCOT participants. End paragraph. You can see it right here. This is, where's this at? Oh, make sure we get it. It's not right here. Let me make sure. Okay, here we go. Right here. This one right here. Right here. And then up to the top here. You can see right here. That is the individual paragraph that is extracted from the last sentence of the paragraph before it. Now, I'm not a spy, but I have enough experience with the print edition of the Dallas Morning News to understand how this could be read by people in the know. Additionally, there is, on this timeline of ERCOT history, some very important matters that need to be addressed. First of all, one of the things that discusses matters that referenced it in 2001, having to do with the deregulation. Then in 2002, it discusses how customers did not receive any bills. Well, 15 years after 2002 would be 2017. 2017 is when the state of Texas implemented numerous changes to its licensing laws, specifically business licenses, connected to, among other things, people involved with repairing air conditioning and HVAC systems, as well as other licensing changes up to and including for cosmetologists and barbers, as well as allowing for changes to licensing for people who were military veterans that were in specialties while they were in the military, corollary to the changes that happened in the civilian ranks. One of the things that I was concerned about at the time I saw this in September of 2017 was that following Harvey, when the state was shut down, every major office was shut down despite what was actually happening outside. The state of emergency was so severe, the government buildings needed to be shut down. There were alterations to the publicly accessible electronic records for state agencies that took place at the end of August. There was different information when those state agencies opened up at the beginning of September than there was at the end of August. This included for the Harris County Commissioner's Office or the Harris County Assessor's Office, as well as information that was available on the state of Texas websites concerning those matters related to licensing, but also connected to the Supreme Court of Texas. I was on site at the license office in Austin when I saw the changes to the licensing laws. The information that is now publicly accessible online concerning the changes to these Texas licensing laws is different than it was at the beginning of September of 2017. That same information is not available in the same manner on the electronic records that was available on site at the licensing office in Austin at the beginning of 2017 after the state of Texas opened its facilities up. Now, most of these changes went into effect on September 1st of 2017, but the entire first week of September, the actual facilities were closed. The state of Texas technically was shut down because of a state of emergency, despite the fact that those laws went into effect. And when was the state of Texas opened up again? More than 10 days later, comparable to what happened during September 11th, when there was a 10-day period after laws in the state of Texas went into effect. And then on the 11th day, well, what happened in the state of Texas on September 11th, 2017? Are we ever going to be honest about this? We don't really have much of a choice these days, do we? Because in addition to those licensing laws in various areas, there were also changes that happened regarding local ISDs, specifically connected to technology infrastructure. That's one. The second thing of concern in this timeline has to do with 2004 concerning the procurement scandal regarding ERCOT. Did anybody happen to hear about what happened on December 12th of 2017? Does anybody know? There was a mayor in another town, San Francisco, who allegedly died of a heart attack while he was shopping in a grocery store. One of the things this mayor did was investigate for a protracted period of time before becoming mayor the procurement system for the city and county of San Francisco. That would have been, by the way, his death 15 years after 2002. In consideration of this, one of the things it says is that fake companies were created. Fake companies are created by several ERCOT managers, and millions of dollars are siphoned from ERCOT funds. 15 years after 2004 would be 2019. And despite the fact that presumably the first appearance of COVID-19 did not occur until December 12th of 2019, COVID-19 has been tethered to the year 2019 this entire time. That continues when it discusses how in 2005 a grand jury indicts 6 ERCOT managers. Number 1, Chief Information Officer. Number 2, Director of Information Technology. Number 3, Data Warehouse Manager. Number 4, Director of Program Development and Physical Security Manager. And the 6th, a former FBI agent is responsible for corporate security. The men used the stolen money to buy boats, luxury homes, and expensive cars. 2005 would have been the year I came to Texas. I came to Texas in the late summer 2005. And in the year 2005, my understanding is that more people were scheduled for execution because of conviction for capital crimes than in the entire history of the state of Texas. And because of the specific proportion of capital executions that occur in Texas in the entire country, more people were executed the year this happened than any year in history up till then, and as I understand, since then. What happens with the cases and with the other information and processes that were connected to the most capital cases ever executed in the state of Texas? Among other things that happened that year was there was a execution that was scheduled for a minor, and it was accomplished. Somebody who had been convicted when he was a minor was executed. And what happened after he was executed? The police officer that offered the testimony convicting him retracted his testimony, but not until after the execution had occurred. That would have been in 2005, concurrent to the processes whereby these 6 people were indicted. But the other thing that's concerning to this, and this is where I'm going to leave it for now, because the other things that are mentioned here, I will get to later. When Donald Trump appointed Rick Perry to be the Secretary of Energy, there were a number of matters that were never attended to publicly, either in the state of Texas or on the federal level, that should have been attended to. Who was the governor of Texas in 2005? Around 2005, the state of Texas implemented a commission regarding biomedicine, biotechnology, bioengineering, and nanotechnology. That was supposed to be a specifically gubernatorial commission. When it was first launched, it was put into effect under the Texas Small Business Code. Now, since then, it has been put into another section of the Texas Government Code. But small business operations during the time frame when these 6 members were indicted and prosecuted had been supplanted by the implementation of that gubernatorial commission. Where are the reports on that gubernatorial commission? 15 years before the onset of COVID-19, the state of Texas just has all of these companies set up. Don't make any sense at the time unless you understand outlays on gas and oil tankers. 15 years after the implementation of a gubernatorial commission around nanotechnology, now we've got the largest demand for mass vaccinations in the history of the world. What do we got on the agenda for 2021? Well, I think we're going to have to figure out what was really going on with the former FBI agent responsible for corporate security. See, I had this thing occur, just happenstance, in the summer of 2017, where I attempted to go to the Department of Justice to provide information I had regarding the shooting death of a sheriff's deputy in Harris County. But I got diverted to the FBI. And when I went to the FBI, I just so happened to have been diverted there on the day that it was Take Your Child to Work Day at the FBI. A very, very specific time frame later, it was Take Your Daughter to Work Day at the Department of Energy, right before Rick Perry stepped down from being Secretary of Energy and violated an executive proclamation he agreed to when he agreed to be Secretary of Energy concerning a 2-year preclusion on lobbying activity that to this day no one's called him out on. Why? It is not appropriate for Abbott or the Texas legislature or anybody else pretending that they are qualified to call themselves government officials to be trying to chastise ERCOT again when they are absolutely 100% culpable with this crime spree. It is not acceptable in any way, shape, or form. That is all I'm going to say for now.